Hey everybody, Onepeg here. I wanted to make a video that had to do, again, with the community and make some, I guess, commentary or evaluative analysis that has to do with, I guess, what I've been seeing from an attitude standpoint in regard to Tarkov as a whole. Let me first say that I have tried my damnedest not to be emotionally invested in this kind of stuff. I mean, after all, it's video games, and we're on the internet playing video games. But at the same time, as somebody that tends to sit in a streaming space, an overwhelming amount of negativity coming from people can still tend to have a bit of an impact on people like me. And as much as I don't want to be, I guess, emotionally affected by what people say and do repeatedly, I can't help being me, and sometimes it gets under my skin. So hopefully you guys don't take this like ultra negatively. I'm not trying to like take a big steaming dump on anyone in particular, but I do feel like there needs to be something said, and hopefully I've developed enough cred in the community to be able to talk about this stuff and not have people kind of just look at me and roll their eyes. I don't know. But anyway, I've noticed that there's been an awful lot of animosity, and it seems like there's this divide growing in the community. Again, this age-old conversation between like Exfil campers or rats and stacked gamers or chads. And I don't look at rats and how they play the same as how Exfil campers play. But I also don't see anything wrong with any of the play styles. For whatever reason, it seems like people that die to extract campers are looking at them as like the lowest of the low, like lower than the belly of a snake. And almost like there's some weird Bushido code of honor that exists among Tarkov players, or should, to where the only honorable fight is one where you're facing each other at 10 paces and AD spam strafing while holding down your left mouse button, spraying the crap out of one of the two of you in hopes that somebody goes down first. And for me, we're not in 1890s America where people are using lead ball pistols to shoot at each other because they got their honor scarred. That isn't how the real world works. And I've seen weird suggestions from the community even, where they're saying like, oh, you should irradiate the exfils so that people take ticking damage if they're sitting in them. Or people should have XP gain penalized because they sat in an extract area for too long. I personally think that that's like just ridiculous. The whole thing, the way that I see the argument against the idea of exfil camping being dishonorable really just comes down to one simple argument. Exfil camping breeds toxicity in the community and is dishonorable. That's it. So I want to unpack that, because nowhere has it ever been written in the Tarkov bylaws that the extracts for any map are somehow considered sacred ground and are some form of disarmament zone. It's never been the case. And I think if they tried to make it that way, it would ruin the game, honestly. So let's unpack this just a little bit. Try and bear with me, okay? Now, before I get into any of this, I want to say very clearly, I do not extract camp. I don't extract camp because it's boring for me. I don't like to play like that because I prefer to be on the move, because I don't want to fall asleep at my computer. But if somebody decides that they want to sit still and ambush people, there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. And I'll explain my position here. Tarkov has always strived to be a game that gets as close to reality as it can while still being a game. There's plenty of mechanics we can point our finger to that show how Tarkov is not realistic, from recoil to the med system, especially, these ridiculous stims that give us, big man, massive donger strength, and like all of this other stuff. And none of that is real, right? But there is some aspect of realism to it. People can get injured. There's bleeding mechanics. There is this need to survive. And overwhelmingly, Tarkov punishes us with this sense of loss because the time to kill is so short. If that's the case, though, wouldn't it make sense that any survivalist playing a game like Tarkov would want to generate as high of a reward as they possibly could for minimal risk because, again, they want to survive. In the real world, this would be considered, in the case of extract camping, a form of guerrilla tactic. It's simply just a choke point ambush. To further this point, people will camp extracts because the tactic is effective. It wins. If it wasn't effective, people wouldn't do it. Is the same thing as any person that goes fishing in general. They go and they fish the same spots. The reason why they fish the same spots is because those spots have fish that bite. They catch fish. If they didn't catch fish, it's likely they wouldn't go there as much or ever again because maybe they're there to catch fish. So why is it effective? Well, some would argue that extract campers all end up just using geometry exploits. They mesh inside of trees and stuff like that. And that has been absolutely true. I don't want to say it hasn't been. But it's since been patched to the effect that while people can still get up into the tops of trees, they're not inside the trunks of them. And while this has been true, I would argue that it has become increasingly less and less. In my experience, watching streams like Exfil campers, the people that typically get caught end up being done so from the confines of just a simple bush, or someone alt-leaning while prone to play dead, or somebody that just simply stands on the face of a cliff and the victim just failed to look up because you can see them standing clear as day against a cliff. In fact, I've had conversations with Exfil in the past about how he's found geometry exploits that are so bad he ended up reporting them and refuses to speak about what it is that he found. So there is, in the vast majority of cases, the sense that he is trying to be as honorable as possible because he doesn't want to be looked at as somebody that just exploits. Which brings me to my first counterpoint. Is the person extract camping dishonorable, or are you just frustrated that your visual acuity wasn't as good as you hoped, or were you some combination of lazy and ignorant to the camping locations that you either didn't know to check or didn't think to check, and that's why you died? If the guy that's camping isn't exploiting and still kills you, there's no one to blame, in my opinion, but yourself. Either for not knowing where to look or not thinking of where to look. And that's why you got caught. Because let's face it, the people that extract camp, the vast majority of the time, are sitting completely still. So here's a scenario. Player A is attempting to extract and they get shot at. Let's say they either survive the first volley of bullets or they end up seeing the camper before the fighting begins, right? So now we have a little bit of anxiety on the case of player A. So they get frustrated. They can't get out of this extract without a fight, and they know it. So they have to make a choice. Do they fight or do they disengage? Fight or flight? If they fight and die, now the camper is a dishonorable cunt because they died to the camper. If player A wins, the camper is still a dishonorable cunt, but now they're dead, so it's okay. They beat them, and they get that sense of accomplishment. Either way, player A ends up making some mental Reddit thread about how the camper is a loser. From a psychological standpoint, I would also say that this exact interaction ends up happening in the vast majority of firefights. How many times have we seen somebody that plays ultra hyper aggressively go ripping around a corner, kill a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4 man, and end up celebrating, yelling, "Get the hell out of my raid," talking about how they got sent back to the express extract, they're going back to the lobby, etc., etc., etc. People gloat. It's part of competition. That's what happens. And I'm not saying that every player reacts this way. There are plenty of people in sports and other competitive environments that talk trash, and there are plenty of people that don't. They let their playing do the talking for them. And there's nothing wrong with either one. But you have to figure out how to be able to deal with that yourself. So the first choice is to fight. The second choice is to disengage. Don't fight. On maps like Reserve, for instance, let's say somebody tried to leave through the repelling extract. If it's too dangerous because they realize that somebody's camping there, or they got shot at, and they decide that, okay, well, I can either fight or disengage, and they opt for disengage, now there's additional risk introduced because there's things like the hermetic door extract that they could try and get through raiders to extract from. There's the D2 extract, which could also potentially have another camper sitting at it, right? Which is another risk of death. Or they have the option of trying to run down to maybe the manhole extract directly down the hill from the repelling extract, which also means that they have to drop their backpack. So now they have to cut bait. And in the case of a player, maybe they don't want to. Gamers don't want to disengage and cut bait. They want to win. And they look at cutting bait and leaving as a show of defeat. But my argument here is which is more important? Getting out with something, cutting bait and leaving, or potentially dying and getting out with nothing, knowing that you just gave your kit and all of your loot to the person that was camping the exfil. Which is more important, your pride or your survival? Sure. If you cut bait and run, maybe the camper then gets a psychological victory. Maybe they laugh about how you ran away. But for anybody that has a relative amount of experience, we've all been in interactions where somebody disengaged and decided to go the other way. And maybe we laugh about it. But who the hell in Tarkov has a 100% survival rate? No one, I don't care how good you are, no one wins every single encounter. For me, the frustrating aspect of all of this happens to be with the player base in general. I look at Tarkov as something that is designed to be challenging. I personally love playing ultra-challenging games. I'm a junkie for all of the Soulsborne games. I play just about every game that I can get my hands on the absolute hardest difficulty possible because I want to overcome the frustration of that level of difficulty. Unfortunately, it seems like the player base, in this case especially, is complaining about how frustrating it is to try and overcome this as a challenge because of the human element. And honestly, the only map that I think you could even start to make the argument about extract camping being a problem is interchange. Because there's really only two main extracts for people that don't have keys to be able to get out of up in the corners. But if you bring a fistful of rubles, the vast majority of the time I would argue there's still the car at the power station. But even then, there are people that will run up to the car, pay the car to leave so that people can't use the extract just to lock down that one exit so that they can't leave from it. And they aren't even extract camping. They just don't want people to be able to get out through there. And we haven't even covered the aspect of camping anything else. People camp marked rooms all the time. But no one ever seems to scream or write Reddit threads about how people camp those marked rooms. The last point that I want to make here has to do with the effectiveness of camping in general. People end up camping these positions because it's effective. Sure, it's boring, and it's not for me. But I don't think anyone in Tarkov would sit in an extract camping bush for raid after raid after raid on end, waiting for someone to come along if they either never get someone or they just die. If they get caught, they never end up getting the reward that they're looking for, so they stop doing it because it's not effective. And the only way that something like this becomes not effective is if the player base as a whole starts realizing where all of these places are that people sit. If you notice, things like D2 aren't camped that much anymore. Maybe once every 20 raids for me, and I'm playing reserve almost exclusively. No one sits in D2 anymore. There's an ebb and flow to all of this. As soon as all of those extracts on reserve got to be more popular, people checked every single corner. They all died. And people made compilations about how campers were getting murdered. That's part of the game. So people stop doing it because it stops being effective. The prevalence of extract camping made extract camping more widespread, but it also made countering it more widespread. And at the end of the day, we all want to be better players. Becoming aware of all of these positions makes us better players. The frustration associated with losing in Tarkov and then breaking through that is something that we all have reveled in. That's why we keep coming back, because we want to be the person that doles out the frustration, not the person that gets frustrated. If there's a main idea to take away from this, I think that it would be this. The world at large has a lot of issues right now. Multiple other things that are going on in the world this year that pretty much make me think Cthulhu's showing up like mid-November. To put so much energy into the mechanic of a video game to where it is pushing people into just spewing this vitriol because they don't approve of the way that somebody decides to play it. Of all the things to complain about, you're going to complain about a video game on the internet. You know? Granted, I'm complaining about people that are complaining. The problem in this community happens to be finger pointing. They don't want to blame themselves, so they point fingers at everyone else and say, this is somebody else's fault. The reason why I died is because that guy is not a member of the Bushido Code. And there is no Bushido Code in Tarkov. There is only surviving. So if you get caught, and as long as the person isn't cheating, if you get caught, it's your own fault. People would live if they ended up playing the interaction differently. They just choose not to. If it's one thing that I could change in this community, it would be to have the level of finger pointing reduced. Because in my book, the thing that breeds the most toxicity is not how other people decide to play the game. It's the judgmental attitude of the people reacting to how other people decided to play the game. Anyway, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for hanging out. Peace.